Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me call this meeting to order, the House Regulated Industries Committee. We have a couple issues in front of us. We have HB 1530 by Ms. Neal, and we have HR 798 by Representative Maynard and Maynor. And with that, I'm going to call the author, Ms. Neal, if you would, come on up. You can sit, either stand at the podium or you can sit at the desk, whatever's most convenient to you. And if you would present your bill, and if you don't mind, tell us, I have the original bill and I have a substitute. And if you have the substitute, whichever one, if you would identify which one you're working from, and then call out the LC number for whichever one you're working from.
We're working from LC 490890. 0890.
You're working from the original bill, not a substitute.
That's correct.
So we need to discard the substitute.
Yes, sir.
All right, if you would, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for the privilege to come before you today. Today, I present to you House Bill 1530. Now, prior to this committee and numerous iterations of this bill, some of you may mention you want to actually see the full outline of the program as opposed to the original constitutional amendment. And this bill is a result of that. This bill is what you have asked us for under the subcommittee. It is the result of the feedback you provided in the committee and with the input of the stakeholders outside of here, to include Georgia Student Finance, the Technical Colleges of Georgia, in addition to my co-sponsors providing their input as well. And thank you to my co-sponsors. So essentially, this bill is an extension of the HOPE program that allows for students to take their HOPE allotment and use it as startup business funds. The bill only provides students with the additional HOPE option. That's it. An additional choice of how to move forward with their future. Because let's face it, essentially in today's climate, so many people are not taking the traditional college route. So if they wanted to run someone's business, run a family business, start their own, this bill, in addition to the programming attached to it, which should be in a pamphlet version that you have on your desk, would allow for students to do so. They will be able to be day one ready when stepping into the business world. This is only an improved addition to the HOPE program. That's it. With this concept, nothing about the current HOPE program changes. The program will still operate under the same conditions we currently have. Nothing about HOPE or who qualifies changes, nothing at all. Right now, we teach people how to work for somebody else. Right now, so many feel forced into only having to go to traditional college and forego their dreams due to not having support or funding. This bill allows for us to build more entrepreneurs in a serious manner. We say Georgia is the #1 state to do business. Let's start them early. Let's prove to the world yet again, we are indeed the #1 state to do business, and this is how we do it. Now, I do also have Les Snyder here, who's been partnering with me on this to present as well, if he could come up.
Is that your initial presentation?
Yes, sir.
All right, and if you're ready, we'll stand in for questions. Chuck Martin, Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Chairman Martin.
Okay, yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I have a question, for the author. Have you had any discussions with Georgia Student Finance about this?
Yes, sir. So thank you so much for the question. Yes, when I started putting this initiative together close to about 2 years ago, Lynn Riley and her staff was one of the first calls I made. I go way back with Lynn. We actually came to the house together over about 10 to 12 years ago. So I have a relationship there, and due to that relationship, she was one of the first people I called. I met with her and her team about everything we're trying to do here. She was supportive of it. And since that meeting, close to about 2 years ago, up until now, we have been in constant communication with her in her office, all the way up until this moment, till this day. We've been in constant communication with Lynn Riley. So yes, I have spoken to Lynn and her team in depth.
Okay, well, I don't want to, I'd like to drill down on that further, Mr. Chairman, because over in higher ed, we, and arguably no disrespect to our regulated industries committee, normally these things that come with student finance come through higher ed. So I have a number of questions, and I would respectfully say that Lynn is not as aware today that this was coming forward, with a bill number of 1530. I mean, I just have a number of questions. For one, HOPE monies. This would take a constitutional amendment, and I suspect that's the other measure that the chairman mentioned we may be hearing today. But HOPE monies are normally paid directly to the institution, and they're paid on an as-you-go basis. I don't know what the lady's thought is of where these monies would be paid. Would they be paid to the student? To the individual?
Yes, sir. So yes, thank you for the question. I'll let my partner Les chime in as well. But yes, I understand your concerns. I'm actually a little put off by the reference to Ms. Riley not being familiar. I've actually been in communication with her team, email and via text message almost daily at this point through the weekend. So I would like to circle back on that. And I think one of the team members might be trying to come to this hearing. But with that, the constitutionality. So originally, yes, this was a constitutional amendment, and it came through it came through economic development last year's constitutional amendment passed out. And it also came through regulated industries once again as a constitutional amendment. In the subcommittee, when I presented the constitutional amendment, the subcommittee found it to be more appropriate that they wanted to see enabling legislation to actually get a full outline of what the program would look like. So taking their wisdom, I drafted the bill that's before you. And with that, I sent that bill off to everybody involved, to the, to the tech schools, to student finance, to some of my co-sponsors as well. Once we made that draft, the committee provided their input of what they want to see within that enabling legislation. And that is what brings us to this point now at this moment. So there are a number of arguments for the constitutionality of this, but when it comes to the disbursement of the funds, the money goes to the school from the perspective of they have to be in the approved program in order to receive the funds. There's no way around that. In order to receive these funds, they have to be in the approved higher education program. Once they do receive the fund after completing the program, they still have follow-up and assessments to ensure that the money that was given to them is used for the appropriate purpose. So at no point is this money just blatantly given out to students for them to go do something completely unrelated with. There are a number of checks and balances outlined through the bill that ensures that that doesn't happen. Now, also to the placement of the bill in this committee, that's at the will of the Speaker of the House. It's advised for me not to challenge that whatsoever, and I have no issue with that. I cannot attest to why the bill was placed here, so I'm not sure if I can answer that question for you. Also, Mr. Lynch.
Well, I won't belabor the point further, but you do agree this can't happen without a constitutional amendment.
I do not agree. There are a number of arguments for the constitutionality of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have a we have a large, I have an opinion, Mr. Chairman, otherwise, that I can share with the chair at a later time.
But also too, Mr. Chairman, if I can respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anything else, Chairman Martin?
No, sir, not at this time. Thank you.
All right, you may want to stay handy in case to hear some of the other questions.
Yes,
So
sir.
Mike can respond, given in your position over at the Higher Ed Committee. All right, anybody else online? All right, number 17, that would be Mr. Linsky.
Thank you, Chairman. I got to hear this amazing presentation in subcommittee. And I just want to say it's very similar to my college experience at University of Georgia. I had the Hope Scholarship, which was a lot better back then than it is now, but I was a broadcast news major and I got to do my whole senior year a live news show 2 days a week. So in a sense, this is exactly what I went through. My Hope Scholarship gave me real life opportunity to have experience where I could have gone to Montana and started out as an anchor right away. I didn't know at the time how much $20,000 a year was in Montana. I would be there now, not here. But this is a great program. Many, especially with the internet apps and all of that stuff that I don't understand. I'm getting old. There's so many opportunities out there, and there's so many people out there who aren't academic who this would pertain to. And the fact that this is going through the schools is a program that each school will set up. Not disagreeing with the chair, but I think this is a perfect use. And if it goes properly through the channels, through the schools and through their programs, I think this is a great opportunity for students to succeed, start companies, which helps our state, brings money back to our state, gets people employed and gets people into the workforce. And we're always trying to do that. So I just want to thank you for bringing this bill and hoping this will help a lot of children and kids who school may not be the answer, and they may have some small thing like Facebook that they want to start one day.
Very good. Even though I have to correct you, these aren't children, these are young adults. We got too many kids anyway that run for public office in this day and time. If I might also ask, now you said that you would have could have been a beneficiary of this. Did you go to a tech school? Is that where you got your law degree?
No, this is not just for tech schools.
I appreciate it.
But I see what you did there. That's why I'm just practicing law.
Number 23, who would that be? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just had one question. Does this have an annual cap of any sort on it?
Yes.
Okay.
The student, this can only produce no more than $20,000 in total, of which 30% could be gone to the institution for the coursework that the student has to take. And no more. And as a result of that, 14,000 would go for the seed money for either the entrepreneurial opportunity or an investment in a business that the student would do. But yes, 20,000 is the cap. And therefore, the student actually would be giving up certain Hope monies that they normally would be entitled to if they went to, let's say, the University of Georgia for 4 years.
Okay. And it's 20,000 per student, right?
Right.
And is there like an annual overall cap that we're going to cap it at?
No,
Like they can only do so much grants per year.
no, it would be, Representative Ridley, it would just be as if a student, again, has to be eligible for Hope, period, before they can even think about this
Okay.
program.
I got you. Okay. That's all I had.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair, if I
Ridley.
could make a comment for the record.
Yes, dear.
On February 17th, there's an email of the first draft of this bill to Lynn Riley and her team. And on March 8th, they received the version that you have in front of you at 4:56 PM.
Let's see. Representative Mitchell. Legislator of the Year, Mitchell.
I don't have a question.
Number 18, who would that be?
Number 18.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can make some profound remarks if it's needed.
Do you want
Always,
to make
huh?
those profound remarks right
Right.
now? Or would you like to wait?
I'd like to wait till the questions are answered because I think I have it.
Chairman Hawkins.
Just for clarity to either the presenter or either one, the grants are being dispersed directly to the student, part of it?
The part of it, in other words, the $20,000 maximum,
Right,
the student would have to complete all the coursework, would
Right.
have to be approved by both the student finance and the university committee as to their business plan.
uh-huh.
And once they successfully complete those courses and meet the requirements of those two committees or mentors, then they would receive the funds for the business opportunity that goes before them.
Does anywhere in the Hope Scholarship or funds dispersed directly to a student?
Under the present system, the student decides the institution that they want to receive the Hope funds. So
Right.
this would be a variation on what
Right.
occurs.
I mean, I'm not against your idea. I just, I want to get clarity because this is a different move and would open up an avenue that could be pursued in other ways. That's all.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And my comments will try to address that when I get an opportunity to talk to the entire committee.
All right, thank you.
I don't think it would just be technical schools.
Vice Chairman Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, as a follow-up to Mr. Representative Neal's comment about the communication with Ms. Riley's staff, I was on the subcommittee and Ms. Riley's, a member of Ms. Riley's staff was at that meeting that day. So I did want to follow up with that comment relative to the previous comments about her not knowing about it.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Martin's gonna open up Martin too.
Chairman Martin.
Yes, sir. To be clear, Mr. Chairman, let me correct that in case I was misheard or misspoke. I didn't mean to indicate that Ms. Riley, President Riley had not heard about it. But the gentlelady, when she represented, was supportive of it. As it has been communicated to me in my capacity as higher ed chair, they have quite a few reservations, and they too are of the opinion that this would cause or need a constitutional amendment. So mine was not to say that they weren't aware of it. Mine was to say that they were not clear on its implementation. And, I'll let them speak to, supportive or not, but they have reservations that they have expressed to me. The question I had was, I thought I had asked earlier that would the money be sent directly to the institutions? And I thought the answer was yes. Now I'm hearing that 14,000 of the dollars would go directly to the student. Am I clear on that, Mr. Schneider?
No, what's clear is that there is a $20,000 cap. The student, as part of the program, the institution would set out the coursework. Student finance would have to approve that coursework. Upon completion of all that coursework, then the money could go to the student up to the $14,000 for the entrepreneurial opportunity. Again, it is almost part of the course that is part of this. And the example we used in the subcommittee is, let's say someone wanted to know about the funeral business. And as a result, they did an apprenticeship program where they had an entire coursework with the university or the school, technical school they went to. And they also spent time with, let's say, Representative Williams in his employ. They would learn that business. And then at the end of all that, they would be able to receive a grant that both the school and student finance would have to approve, and use that money either to perhaps to make an investment in Mr. Williams's business, to set up their own business, or to utilize that and leverage that with bank funds to be able to start a new enterprise, or make an investment in Mr. Williams's business. So this entire program is tied to the successful completion of a course. And
Let me,
again,
let me interrupt you if I can, Les. Let me
Sure.
ask a question just as simple as I can. Is it not true that $14,000 would be paid to the student to invest in a business and not go to the university system or the technical college system of Georgia or a private, nonprofit proprietary Hope eligible institution? Is yes or no?
it would go to the institution. The institution would then
No,
give back.
No,
the
no, no,
14
no, that's not
would
what,
give
that's not
back
what you
the-
said earlier. Don't confuse the issue.
Okay, I'm not.
$6,000 would go to tuition. You just said that the 14,000 would go to the student to be invested. in businesses. So is that not true?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. So we are trying to make sure that Georgia Student Finance has the leg room to institute the money side and the payment of it and whatever they deem appropriate. As of now, as the bill is written, the way it appears that we would present the financial portion is the 20,000 will be dispersed to the school. They would take the less amount that covers the cost of the technical program that the student has to attend. And then upon completion of this program, the balance of those funds, if the school and student finance sees it appropriate, they would then disperse those funds to the student in whatever manner they feel appropriate. But the inception of that money goes to the school because the initial payment that has to happen is the payment for the technical program that they have to be in order to qualify for the balance of the funds.
I understand that, but I just want to be clear that the majority of this fund, 70% would be ultimately, after completion, that's fine. But there's no other place in Hope where you get your degree, you're finished, and you have money left under the cap that it's paid to the student. Is that true?
That is true. And I do want
And-
to speak to one thing, and it might address some of the things you're concerned about. This is new. This has not been done before. I understand that it can appear challenging. I understand that people have a lot of questions, but that's how we had Hope to begin with. So when it comes to trying something new and getting an understanding of how things can work, this is the mechanics of it. This is the reason for this process and why we're doing it in this manner and making sure that we're inclusive of everybody on this journey. So thank you so much for your questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I can finish, I'll try to do this in the form of a question. Isn't it true that just this year, we're getting back to a base level of 90% in reimbursing our students for Hope? And Chairman Powell, you've been around since the early days when Hope was grabbed at to pay for furniture and fixtures and a lot of technical stuff over at GPB and put us in a place where we had to cut back on Hope. The Ladies program has merit. I just question Hope being the funds that are used to invest in business. If economic development wants to, is it not true? If they want to get involved in this, let Hope pay for the tuition as it's supposed to do, and let economic development use funds, or if we're feel strongly about it, we find funds in the budget. But taking money away from the Hope Scholarship to invest in a small subset of businesses is not, in my opinion, it's not constitutional now. In the opinion of others, it's not constitutional now, nor is it appropriate considering we're not yet back to fully funding the Hope Scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Let's see here. Chairman Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions that I have. So let's say I go through this program, my business is not successful. Do I have an opportunity to go back to school and get an education and use Hope?
Under the way this bill has been drafted, you have a choice. You
Okay.
either go the traditional Hope route or you do this program.
Okay, but once, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Certainly.
but once I roll the dice and I crap out, so to speak, I can't change my mind and then go back to the well and ask to have more money to go to school. Is that correct?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
A couple more questions I have.
Certainly.
Basically, they're just a comment. And to the author of the bill's point, this state took a huge gamble with Hope. And I think over the years, you have seen maybe the cost of tuition go up as the revenue for the lottery has gone up. If I'm mistaken, Mr. Chairman, you can correct me there.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
you're
And,
absolutely
and that's a
right.
shame. That's a shame. And I hope the conservative chancellor will address some of that in his new role as chancellor of the university system, but we'll have to wait and see. The other thing I would say is, would the author, one thing I'd like to ask, would the author of the bill be willing to put a sunset on this?
Yes, sir.
Just because I view this as a pilot
Okay,
program, and
okay.
I like the fact that you put guardrails in place, that it's just not going to be a free ticket to everyone, but you do have the educational aspect, and they're not just getting free money. They have to do some things to qualify.
Right.
But that would be just a question that I have for you is, if we get 4 or 5 years down the road and see that this has been a failure,
Mhm.
I would hate to see the program continue on. And in my perspective, yes, I was one of those kids that got hope when I graduated from high school. I did not complete my bachelor's degree. I have an associate's degree.
Mhm.
This would have been a very beneficial program for me. I established a business in 2002, and I would have loved to have had access to finances to help me with my business. But one of the reasons why I see this as a win, this money that we're using, I mean, it's basically gambling money. It's hope money. People have bet on lottery tickets. And so we're not using necessarily taxpayer dollars to do this. So what's wrong with us gambling on some young people and trying to help them establish their way in life? And I that's why I'm supporting the bill, and that's why I appreciate the bill. But I would be very concerned if we didn't have some type of guardrail in place as a sunset, and then come back before this body in a few years with success stories. I
Yes.
understand there are going to be some failures.
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at the statistics on small businesses, startups, and what the statistics say about a failing company, so I don't expect it to be something that doesn't have failure. And I think you'd be looking into a fool's paradise if you thought that this was going to be successful 100% of the time. But guardrails, I think, would be a good way to ensure those who are unsure that this would be something we could look at again. Thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. Thank you for those, for your comments. And to legislative council, if we could start to prepare a line to add a sunset, if that's okay, Mr. Chair? Is that okay?
The bill is in your court right now. and If you have some things you need to add to it, we'd certainly entertain that.
Yes, I want to do it like we've been doing it for the other hearings, which is get your input, put it in. So,
Number 17, Mr. Walensky.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say it's surprising to me. There's a discussion of the constitutionality, but it seems like it is. And the amount of bills I've seen in my 2 terms past this House that were clearly unconstitutional, I don't think that's any reason to vote here when it seems, I think it's leaning that this is constitutional and this is such a great thing for our students, not our children, in our school system. So I'm excited about this program, and thank you again.
Did I understand you to say that you, in your 2 terms, you say 2 years or 2 terms?
2 terms.
In your 2 terms, did I understand you say you've clearly seen things that have been passed that were unconstitutional
Yes, Chair.
out of this committee?
No, out of the House, sir.
Yeah,
Never out of this.
well, this ain't the House. This is regulated industries. All right. Chairman Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm feeling better about this bill, especially, on lines 98, recover all parts of the investment dispersed to him or her in case there is a problem along the way. You have oversight of the technical schools, who got oversight in a number of different directions. It's not a bad idea. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to echo everything that my colleagues in this committee has presented. We vetted it thoroughly in the subcommittee, and now we're here. I'd like to propose an amendment for the sunset.
At the proper time. All right, number 16, Legislator of the Year, Mitchell, my friend.
Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate this. I think Representative Collins is extremely correct in that I think that we created the monster for the Hope Scholarship. You know, I tell folks all the time now that you can't get into our flagship universities unless you are a Hope Scholar or better, or an outstanding athlete. And what has happened is we have more with the tuitions raising, and we got a system when we feed that everyone should go to college when some folks need a technical education. And like, I think this is, I think there's some who believe that it is unconstitutional and they're entitled to their opinion. But I think this is exactly what the legislature should be doing in the times that we are facing right now. I would suggest that we go move right ahead. I think subsequently down the line, I remember, Mr. Chairman, you give me the sign if I go on too long. But I remember, I wasn't in the legislature then, but I remember when the lottery was being proposed, and I remember the media accounts, some of the criticisms were just what we are hearing today. And I don't think you can find at least one that is still seeking votes from people who will say we need to get rid of the lottery or the Hope Scholarship. I don't think you'd find one elected official that would say that. And back in those days, you could have found almost a majority. But in any event, for that reason, and because what I believe this will do for Georgia and Georgians, and for those who would not otherwise have the opportunity, had this been in effect, I could have been somebody, Mr. Chairman. I could have made something of myself. So for that reason, I'm going to make a motion that we do pass this legislation.
Well, at the proper time, but this isn't the proper time. But if you'll just hold your thoughts for a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Williams.
I just wanted to tell Representative Mitchell it wasn't too late.
Very good. Very good. Number 16, who is that? Is that Representative Mitchell again?
No.
All right. Representative Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend Representative Neal for all of her hard work on this bill. I will have to admit that when I first heard about it, I was very skeptical and the idea of a grant for small business, but I was on the subcommittee that heard it and given a lot of thought. And I've talked to some of your other co-signers, and I went and co-signed the bill after our subcommittee meeting, and I did vote to pass it out of the subcommittee. I think it is a very creative bill and an excellent bill to deal with some of our workforce development challenges in Georgia. There are many, many people who are the backbone of our state because they are good, very small business operators who have a skill that they can sell, and they do great work for us, providing us the services we need and paying taxes. And so I think it's a good bill. I think it's creative. The constitutionality question will be addressed at the appropriate time. But I'm glad to hear many of my colleagues here on the Regulated Industry Committee express support for your bill. And so, Mr. Chairman, I will be voting yes on this if we get the motion at the appropriate time.
Right. All right. Do we have anyone online? Anybody, any of the members online that wish to be?
Yes, sir.
Representative Jones, excuse me, Speaker Pro Tem Jones.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've read the bill over and I will not be able to vote for it. I'm sorry to say I do not believe that it's constitutional, but perhaps in the form of a constitutional amendment, I would consider. I just wanted to let that be known, but thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Any other questions from any of the audience, or do we have anyone here that wishes to testify?
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a few comments based on what was said, I'd appreciate it.
You can, but I think we need to see, is there anyone else in attendance? If you would, come up and identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bruce Williamson. Can you hear me?
We can.
I just want to echo Speaker Pro Tem Jones' remarks, I feel like the idea has wonderful merit. I'm new to the discussion.
Go right ahead.
Question to the author is, did she receive a letter from Legislative Council?
All right. Still there, Chairman Williams?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can.
So my question to the author of the bill is, did she receive a letter from Legislative Council expressing concern that it might be unconstitutional?
All right. Very good. If you would, we have and if you could identify yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tim Carroll. I am Senior Director for Educated Workforce at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, coming to you in support of House Bill 1530. Over the past 2 years, the U.S. has seen over 4 million new businesses start up, and Georgia has been the recipient of double-digit percentage increases for small businesses. And we think that this program is not only going to put us in the front of that leadership column for small business, but greatly expands our economic development prospects for the future. So we ask for your favorable consideration on the bill.
All right. Do we have any questions of the gentleman? Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Do we have anyone else in the audience that wishes to be heard before we move to the next people to testify? All right. We just had we've just had some most distinguished folks that just came in, and I thank them for hurrying over because I know they were testifying over in the Senate committee. We have Commissioner Riley and Ms. McLeod, absolutely one of the finest folks that I've ever dealt with, and they can maybe shed a little bit of light on this. And I'll recognize Ms. Riley at this point. And thank you so much, you and Haley, for coming over from the Senate. This has got to be a whole lot more entertaining than being over there.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Lynn Riley, President of the Georgia Student Finance Commission, and I apologize for not being able to follow the conversation this morning. We were in Senate Higher Ed Appropriations, defending the bill and the additional appropriations that you provided for us for many of the programs that we will be excited to offer students in the state of Georgia. I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
If I might ask, Ms. Riley, are you familiar with the bill? Have you?
Yes, we have reviewed the latest version. We've not had conversations with the author at this point, and due to the high nature of the number of bills that we have been working on. We are aware that there's some questions about the constitutionality of the bill as presented and whether it would need a constitutional amendment to proceed.
When you talked about the recent version, now we're working from the original as introduced version. There's no substitute here.
I see.
And I did have a couple of questions. I've been kind of listening to all the questions. And I know that some of these are going to take legal counsel. But we know when we're talking about, despite my good friend, Mr. Linsky, you can take 5 lawyers and to ask a question about constitutionality, and you're going to get 10 different versions or 10 different answers. And that's one thing, but I do have a couple of specific questions. Being a strong proponent of the technical system of Georgia, which I've always considered to be absolutely probably the best post-secondary money ever spent in the state of Georgia, especially through the HOPE. I know this also includes the University of Georgia into these programs, even though I'm not quite sure how that's going to operate after they go through and then do a loan program for. But is this a loan? Let me back up. Is this a loan? This is a grant.
Grant.
So my question is 2 questions. One deals with constitutionality. And I think we've all talked about that, could be anywhere off the board. Second question I've got is, if someone uses their HOPE eligibility and they go to the school and then to take a stipend to start their own business. To me, that's coming awful close to the gratuity clause of state law. I mean, that, maybe that means nothing, but I do remember that we used to take some consideration into the gratuity that you can't give something that belongs to the taxpayers away. And if you're, and maybe that doesn't mean anything, maybe I'm just off base, because I do like the concept. I like what she's saying. That's the reason I'd like to see probably be more restricted to the GTAE. Because in most cases, and I had heard the example about funeral homes. Well, you know, we have a system in this state that quite frankly bears a lot of upbringing, and that's in the licensing professions that, you know, I don't know, but I'm sure that Representative Williams could talk about the funeral home business. You got to go to a embalming school before you're even, while you're starting on your hours. But I'm not quite sure what a loan or a grant or whatever is going to get somebody into that, because that's pretty restrictive business.
Just to clarify, you can do all your apprenticeship and then go to mortuary college, or you can go to mortuary college, then do all your apprenticeship afterwards. Either way is acceptable.
Pretty highly restricted. Then when you look at most of the other trades that are licensed in the state of Georgia, you know, quite honestly, a lot of those trade boards, in my opinion, of ever how long I've been here, a lot of those are there for one reason, that's to keep competition from getting in business, even though there's a lot of them that are, you know, very good about what they do. Case in point, I just had a guy who's a 20-something year electrician at Duke Power across the South Carolina line for me. And he's applied trying to get his electrical license in Georgia, said he didn't qualify because working in a nuclear plant, doing commercial electricianing in their mind doesn't qualify in Georgia. And that's kind of strange to me. But anyway, a couple of those questions. The gratuity clause is one. Maybe Commissioner Riley could maybe lend a little advice about the constitutionality to this. And then we have lead counsel over here, and I'm sure she'll tap dance around that as quick as she can, given the nature of constitution versions of constitutionality. But maybe you could address the gratuity clause.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Counsel for the Georgia Student Finance Commission and I reviewed the bill as it's currently before you, which speaks to investment funds being provided to a student after they successfully complete the program at TCSG. We believe that those investment funds would not be constitutional as the law and the Constitution currently exists. The HOPE program lottery dollars are for educational purposes only. And dollars that might be provided to a recipient would not necessarily be for educational purposes. They would more likely be for investment in inventory, supplies, potentially payroll and other startup costs for the entrepreneur program that the student has successfully completed. We believe that that's of concern, and should this program be embraced by the General Assembly, it would need a constitutional amendment to expand the uses that lottery dollars can be provided for.
And that comes from your counsel.
That is from our general counsel.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go back and that is similar to the information that I have and I tried to express earlier, but I wanted to ask the author a question. I think Secretary Williamson asked, Representative asked is, Representative Neal, do you have an opinion from Legislative Council that opines on the constitutionality or lack thereof of this measure as it's before the commission? Have you been given that letter?
Yes, thank you for the question. So to answer your question, yes. I actually requested the letter last week, and to make sure for myself, I like to be well prepared. So for me, I wanted to say, hey, if someone's challenging the constitutionality of my bill, I want to know what that argument would look like. But then as you step into page 2, we address how our general counsel feels that there's an argument that the bill is constitutional as written. But I do want to step back for 1 second.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just get to the question, if the lady has the letter, would she share that with the committee?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. But also too, I want to make a comment. So close to 2 years ago when I met with Ms. Riley and the team, this was we were having a discussion about which direction to take. And the original draft of the version was a constitutional amendment. This enabling legislation is the request of the committee. Instead of the constitutional amendment, the subcommittee wanted to see what the constitutional amendment would look like if we were to have the whole plan as a whole. So I want to make sure that I alleviate any feeling from anyone that I'm trying to avoid a constitutionality question. We are more than prepared to do a constitutional amendment if this body feels it's necessary, just like the same way when we had to prepare HOPE. HOPE came through 2 parts. Constitutional amendment came through it and then had a enabling legislation, which is what we're addressing today. So to the question of avoiding that conversation, that is nothing we are running away from. And also to thank you, Ms. Riley, for being here.
My pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy if it would be helpful so that to alleviate Representative Jones, Representative Martin, and Representative Williams's view. As you all know, when a bill passes the General Assembly, there's a presumption of constitutionality. And as Representative Powell, you've indicated, if you have 2 lawyers, you'll have 6 opinions as to it. But I think it's important to hear the part from Legislative Counsel's letter that says that on the issue of acceptable use of lottery proceeds, the argument would be that in order to access the investment funds, a student must attend a college or university in the state. The student must complete authorized program prerequisites, and the tuition portion of the grant program is expressly dedicated to covering tuition costs. Furthermore, a student may only receive investment funds by agreeing to comply with authorized program requirements, including but not limited to requirements related to the assessment and review of the student implementation of his or her business plan. A student who fails to comply with such requirements faces the prospect of losing all or part of the investment funds. According to this argument, no constitutional amendment is necessary because the HOPE Small Business Grant Program falls within the scope of acceptable use of lottery proceeds. Going to Representative Powell's point about a gratuity, the argument there is that the state would receive a benefit with the award of such investment funds. Specifically, each student who accepts investment funds must agree to forego more than 2 years of HOPE scholarship and grant awards, which was Representative Collins's point. In other words, in exchange for approximately $14,000 in investment funds under the HOPE Small Business Grant Program, a student would forego as much as an estimated $30,000 in HOPE awards. So I understand that we can always bring up constitutional issues. And again, the HOPE scholarship is for the student, not for an institution. The institution provides the education, and we are trying to help the student in this particular event. There are some people that learn by going to class all the time, and there are some people that learn by doing and going to class. This is trying to address that issue. And I understand that there always can be lawsuits on any issue that passes the General Assembly, but there is a presumption of constitutionality when you all pass a law. And then it's up to the courts to make that decision. It's your decision today whether or not this bill moves forward, that this idea that many of you have expressed as being innovative and positive gets a chance to see the light of day. And I don't think it's a good idea to have a bureaucracy dictate what the General Assembly says they think is a good idea. And I have ultimate respect for the Student Finance Commission, but if you look through this bill, the student involved has to not only pass mustard with the Student Finance Commission, they have to pass mustard with the institution, come up with a business plan that makes sense. And I've had a number of people who I have known in my life who have been involved in work study, apprenticeship programs, and have been very successful. And Representative Collins is right. There are going to be failures and there are going to be successes, just as there's people who go to college who make something of themselves and other people that don't. And I don't think we ought to destroy the organism by dissecting it. I think this is a program that, again, the child has to qualify for hope, number one, or the student has to qualify for hope. And most importantly, it gives them a chance to get into the business world and at the same time learn the basics of how to put together a business plan, how to know about financing of a business. This money is going to attract other investment money that can be very helpful. Again, as it goes through the process, and I think the idea of a sunset makes perfect sense, but to take the position today that you think it's unconstitutional when Legislative Council, in the paragraphs I've read to you, give you a basis of constitutionality, I think would be premature at best and not positive at worst. So again, we are not talking about the fact that this is good for every student, but it is good for a large number of students who might never go to college, who might never
Chairman
get
Powell.
the necessary business courses to be able to have a good head start on setting up a business. Representative Washburn pointed out that his brother was in the HVAC business, and these courses probably would have helped him when he started out on that business. So I would hope that the committee takes a positive passage of this bill, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could continue, I had a question of the lady, and Mr. Snyder decided he would opine for a minute with us on that. Can I complete my question?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would thank the lady, and I think would like to share the letter with the committee. I think that would be wise, and want to tell the lady, I'll ask this more question. I don't have an issue with the program you're trying to do. But let me say this, I have an absolute issue with taking money from Hope to fund the $14,000, constitutional or not. We're not fully funding Hope with the money we have. There's an unlimited amount of Hope dollars coming in. So, to the representative, I think you have a good idea. I think I have sincere agreement with you on the idea, but everybody reaches, is it not true, Chairman Powell? You've been here a long time. Everybody reaches in Hope, because I've heard from the committee, it's just money. It's always there. If this is worth doing, it's worth appropriating money from. So let me say this, I still don't believe it gets past the constitutional issue. And I, for one, am not going to do what was done when Hope first came out here, when they decided to fund the GPB building and run us into a place where we had to reduce the allotment to Hope for the students that have it. I would work with the lady on identifying additional funding, but the issue I have here is the way it's come forward and the place it's identified. Again, it's always out there to get the money because it's a pot of money everybody grabs for, and the more we grab, it's taken. The pro tem and I, working with the governor, Madam Pro Tem, 3 years to get Hope filled back up to 90%. And this could be a large amount of money that comes out of it. If it's an economic development tool, it should come out of economic development. So my reservation is not with the idea, but I'm not going to game the system and hold my breath that somebody doesn't challenge the anti-gratuity portion of the Constitution, or the fact that Mr. Snyder, in his own words, in his comments, call the $14,000 investment money, not education money. And that'll be pulled back. It's absolutely an investment. Worthy or not, it shouldn't come out of Hope dollars. Isn't that true?
If I may. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for the questions. First of all, I want to definitely want to make sure I address the comment of taking from Hope. Taking from Hope, that is not accurate. We are not taking from Hope. Nothing when it comes to this program changes. The same allocation, and that's where we got the $20,000 from. 15 credit hours times 2 semesters is 30. Right now, the numbers looking at Hope are around like 7,000 and some change for each set of 15, which gets us to about 15,000 plus the amounts that we have assumed would be the cost of the program up to about $5,000, which would be the 30% that I'm referencing in the bill. That money, if a student were to go and take the Hope right now at this moment, those same exact dollars are the same exact dollars they would have used to go to Hope. But instead, they say, hey, the money you guys are going to give me anyway to go to this particular school, can I use it to start this great idea I have? The second part, when it comes to constitutionality, I want to make sure I'm very, very, very clear on this. This bill came through this subcommittee and it came through economic development as a constitutional amendment. In the subcommittee, it was the request of the committee for it to be enabling legislation first. And we all understand that there's no problem with coming back with a constitutional amendment for next year to get everything enacted. But this is a part of the program. If it has to be 2 parts, which I've spoken to a number of people about, hey, if it has to be 2 parts and we have to do this enabling legislation that was requested by the subcommittee first, I am completely fine with that. If you all want me to come back next year, God willing, then and do the constitutional amendment that I originally proposed, that is fine too. But I want to make sure that we don't have any abrasiveness when it comes to the constitutionality side, because the only reason we did the switch was because the subcommittee asked for the switch, which is perfectly fine because they wanted to see what this would look like before they just passed a constitutional amendment out of the committee. So to Chairman Martin, I want to make sure that we are definitely on the same page. I'm not trying to challenge you in reference to that, but based on the information that we were given by our general counsel in conjunction with the original way this bill came through this committee, we were operating, I am operating the way the committee has requested me to, and doing the enabling legislation is what they preferred instead of doing the constitutional amendment first.
I might ask, which committee are you talking about?
The Regulated Industries Subcommittee. The original way this bill came through was as a study.
Chairman Carpenter.
Yes. And in that they said, hey, we really want to see the mechanics of this. So instead, can you get us a enabling legislation instead?
All right. Chairman Carpenter, I think you're online. And are you wishing to be heard?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I've been listening in. I understand people's concern. I think my first thought would be this. Yes, we wanted to see how this, the ins and outs of how this program would work. And that's why we went out of the constitutional route, because it was just, we talk all the time about programs, and I thought it was important to see the clarity of where she was going and what we thought would work for this program. I would also challenge the thought that this is going to be a strain on Hope, because these kids could always, because they've qualified for Hope, they could always go the traditional school route. So it should not be new money created or draining on Hope, because they're already qualified for the Hope program as is. Obviously there's some heartburn on the issue, but I think it's a creative way to look at building small business owners moving forward.
All right. Pardon? Thank you, Chairman Carpenter. We know how innovative that you can be. Speaker Pro Tem Jones.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did just want to clarify and agree with Les Schneider that funds follow students, not institutions. But with regard to Hope, they only fund the student for technical college, for pre-K, technical college tuition, higher, the colleges and universities tuition, and for pre-K. They don't follow the student for investment grants. And I think it would be premature to put on the floor of the House a bill that I don't think it's really a question as to whether it's constitutional. I think it's unequivocally not constitutional. Let's see if we can get a constitutional amendment first, or identify another source of funds for your program. It's not about, I heard the word bureaucracy. It's not the bureaucracy of the lottery. It's what was the lottery approved for? And it was very few items. And I just don't think this follows it. I'll look at the legislation as to the details, but it would be prudent, I think, for the author to look for a source of funding. It could just, I mean, what's wrong with the general budget, and let it compete with every other program that we have, including nursing home funds, foster care children, and everything else. But I think we should, as a legislature, be very careful about what we consider will come out of the lottery at this point. And whether it's this or something else, I don't even know if I could personally vote for a constitutional amendment that expanded the use of the lottery, because if it's a good program, what's wrong with a $30 billion general budget and letting it compete for those funds? But that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've enjoyed the debate.
Pro Tem.
If I
Number
would.
18, that would be,
If I may make a comment.
yes, ma'am. Go
Yes.
ahead.
And thank you so much, Speaker Jones, for your questions or your statements also. I did want to bring up the fact that, enabling legislation passed for the HOPE first before the constitutional amendment was passed. And I feel as though this was more appropriate, because the fear with trying to attack the general budget is leaving it up to chance and hoping that it is appropriated for. And my goal for this bill was to reduce chance and have students have a guarantee of getting this type of support, instead of having to battle with the appropriations process, and making it where using the framework that we already currently have. And that's what it was important to me, when speaking to Ms. Riley, trying to operate within the parameters that we currently have to make it easier on the departments that would have to put the program in place. So, but thank you so much for your comments.
All right. Number 18.
My question's to the chair. You've been around here long enough. Do we pass bills and then pass constitutional amendments?
Not as a rule.
And do we have a constitutional amendment even ready to go with this bill?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yes.
And where is that constitutional amendment?
I can. It's in the subcommittee.
Is it in this committee?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
In subcommittee, at the lottery subcommittee.
So we have a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
All right. All right, let me make a suggestion. I'm gonna make a couple of comments, and maybe this helps, or maybe it'll hurt. I'm not sure. As the chair of this committee, I like the concept. I hear what you're doing. I'm not quite sure about a business loan grant, but that's the path you've chose to go with this. I'm not sure that will is going to necessarily help our Hope Scholarship funds. I'm one of those people. I've watched this for 30 years now, and I've watched this being basically the child of the university system. I have said this, and I'm very plain spoken about it, that we have a system that's set up that's kind of dismal to me, that they don't even raise tuition until they see what the audit was from the year before, how much money came in so they could jack it up.
Mm.
And if I sound like I'm rather disappointed in it, and I like the university system, I love the technical vocational schools, because I think that's, as I said earlier, that's the best money I know of post-secondary education to be spent. But the lottery funds that come in, it's unusual to deal with. Trust me when I say that, because these folks basically will pick the bones off the carcass if they can. And that's the best way. And that's, quite honestly, that sounds rude, but it's the best way I could say it. I like this concept. I think that on the opinion of this chair, I think that this thing needs to have both a constitutional amendment and the language for the committee to deal with. Now, that being said, since there is a constitutional amendment that's in the subcommittee, I'm going to see if we can reschedule this meeting for later today.
Okay.
Because you do need to move. If it's going to have a chance, it needs to move forward.
Yes, sir.
And I think that because there is so much questions about the constitutionality,
Okay.
then I think both bills need to travel in unison.
Okay.
And that's my opinion about it. And if I'm wrong, then I'm the chairman and I can be wrong at times. But at this time, I'm going to hold back on any vote to this.
Okay.
If you will, and if you have any work that you think needs to be done on the bill, I know you had a substitute that we haven't heard from. I don't know the difference in the substitute and the bill. I'm going to instruct our committee secretary, Ms. Brown, to see if there's some way that she can reschedule this meeting room for possibly 4 o'clock. Would that give you enough time to do whatever you need to do?
More than enough time.
And I would like for you to pick out whatever committee members that you would like to help you if you think, I mean, I look around and I see several members who think that this is a good proposition. I think it is too. I'm questioning about whether, I still question about the gratuity clause. You know, if somebody's going to start a business, they need to maybe be doing it through a small business loan or program or something like that. But if we can have a meeting, if we can get something scheduled for later this afternoon, we'd be glad to hear that and the constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Now, that being said, for the committee members that are online, we'll let you know, hopefully, that we'll have a second go around at this and move forward. I certainly want to thank Ms. Riley and her able assistance being here today. You know, I think that, to me, your general counsel's opinion about a CA was worth volumes. I don't know who he is, but he's one of them 10 that I said could one of those 5 that could produce 10 different answers. But I like a straightforward answer about constitutionality. And despite what my good friend, Mr. Walensky says, there might be unconstitutional acts that are passed, but they ain't coming out of this committee and might be knowingly doing it. So that being said, we'll try to schedule something for later in the afternoon.
That's fine.
If that suits. And I want to thank you for innovative thinking.
Thank you so much.
Sometimes we need folks to think outside the box.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Next up. Jan, if you could go ahead and see if you could find a room for later on, we'll take this issue back up. We have in front of us House Resolution 798. Representative Minor. Ms. Minor, it sure is good to see you here.
It's good to see you too, Chair.
If you would, we have in front of us HR 798.
Yes, LC 510088.
All right.
And thank you for allowing me to come this morning. Thank you for being a sponsor of the bill, as well as Chair Gravely and Representative Lim and Representative Jackson. I did speak to the speaker's office this morning, and so they did have some recommendations, mainly just making this a house study committee instead of a joint study committee. And so on line 1, it would say creating a study committee for cannabis waste disposal and recycling and for other purposes. And I'll just read it for the sake of the audience. Whereas the use of products related to the cannabis plant, including but not limited to hemp, CBD oil and products, medical products and various derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers related to the plant have been and are expected to continue increasing in prevalence of use. And whereas the process of manufacturing such products can create considerable volumes of waste, which can cause complications to traditional waste disposal, but which, if captured and treated properly, has been found to be, thank you, valuable and reusable for other purposes. And whereas other states and private industry are already exploring the uses and value of waste from cannabis products, including for uses in producing renewable energy, manufacturing, and composing. And on the back side, it really is just on page 2, it's going through and making sure it is a joint committee instead of and making it a house study committee. And then on lines 22 and 23, those would be eliminated since.
All right, if I might interrupt for a second, let me see if I can help move this on, since it looks like we're going to come back in just a little while, maybe, if we can get a movement. Lake Council, if you would, and I think that Representative Maynard has had some good suggestions and good advice given. In joint study committees, hard to get the Senate to do much of anything. And I do appreciate this, but the advice that you were given from the Speaker's office is probably correct. We can do a House study committee just get it through the House. I would recommend if you'll give Lake Council your advice, your language for the changes, and just basically to create a House study committee. 5 members appointed by the Speaker.
Okay.
And I think that'd be just quick. And if she can prepare something, we can move yours on out for you right now. If she can. Yes, and you could do it while Chairman Collins is talking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that the author of this bill understood that I did not want to be a part of that study committee. I just wanted to be very clear about that. And also, Mr. Chairman, it looks like we have a group of young people here over to my left that came in that were observing. Looks like they're with Representative Marcus Wiedauer. Maybe you'd like to take a point of personal privilege and
Well, thank
recognize
you.
that group.
I did not see Chairman, Mr. Wiedauer behind the post there, but while council is working on the language for Representative Maynard, we'll suspend your testimony and you keep your seat. Mr. Wiedauer, if you come forward and introduce your group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Collins. Appreciate it. I have my wife with me and 2 of my children. We got 3 7th graders, 2 9th graders over here. They got a teacher work day to day. 2 9th graders, Kennedy on the far end, my daughter, they're going to be down here next week for youth assembly. So they thought they'd take the day to get an idea what this really looks like, since they're going to kind of act it out next week. Unfortunately, since we're in session, they're actually not going to be able to come to the Capitol like usual. Usually they'd be in the chamber and what have you, but they're going to be down at one of the hotels near the airport. But so we want to take the minute to let them see what a real committee looks like. And why not come see the legendary Chairman Powell himself? So thank you for having us.
You're being way too kind, and I thank you for that. But would any of your students like to come to the podium and say a word? And this is your daughter?
Yes, sir. This is my middle.
This is your middle child?
Yes, sir.
And thank God she takes after her mother with a full set of hair. Welcome, dear. If you would
Hi.
tell us who you are.
I'm Kennedy Wiedauer. I go to Coney County High School. I'm in 9th grade.
And you're in what grade?
9th grade.
And do you have an interest in public affairs?
Not really.
Ah. Well, there you go. But we want to thank y'all for coming and,
I was
you
gonna
know,
say, she can tell you what bill she's gonna present next week.
oh, yeah, and tell us about that.
My friend and I are writing a bill about limiting out-of-state contributions in state campaigns.
Very good. Very good. Kudos, kudos. Very good. Well, we welcome you here today and hope you don't know how long you've been there observing, but hope you've been able to see a little bit about how we operate as a committee,
Yes.
especially when I talk about unconstitutionality of legislation. Thank you, dear.
Appreciate it,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Marcus. I don't know, would your wife be kind enough to stand up so we can see how blessed you really are? Good to have you here, dear. All right. Flag Council, do you have the language ready? All right. If you would, what is your mic number? Lucky 13, all right?
So the changes would be throughout. You would change it from a joint study committee or a committee of the General Assembly to one of the House. And so to do that, you would start off on line number 1 and you would say creating the House Study Committee instead of the House creating a joint committee. Then you would go down to line 13 and instead of being resolved by the General Assembly, it would be it resolved by the House of Representatives. Then you would go down to where you create the study committee, and on line 15, it would be creation of a House study committee. And then after that, it would say there's created a House study committee on cannabis waste disposal and recycling. And then in terms of the membership, the committee would be, do you still want it to be 10 members or do you want it to be 5?
5.
Okay, then it would be 5 committee members of the House of Representatives to be appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And then it would be the Speaker shall designate a member of the committee as chairperson of the committee. In terms of the meetings on line 27, instead of co-chairperson, it would be the chairperson shall call all the meetings. In terms of the allowances, that provision, it would need to be changed on line 37 to just state that those funds would come out of funds appropriated to the House of Representatives. Since there is since there are no committee members that aren't representatives, and I would adjust that language to affect
Mild
that.
question to the membership. Do you think this needs to be possibly 3 days or 5 days total for this study committee? Any of the committee members? 5? Anybody else? 5? Anyone else? 5? All right, if you go up to 5 or 5, that'd be just fine.
5 is the standard language. We do adjust it at the will of the committee or the member, but 5 is
Alright.
the standard that we usually start
Good
with.
deal. Now, to all the members, do we have anyone online that wishes to testify? No? Very
And then,
good.
Mr. Chairman, if the committee would just allow, we have standard language actually for the committee. So really the stuff that isn't standard is just the part that's in lines 1 through 12. After that, it's pretty standard. So if it's the will of the committee, I'll just conform it to a House study
Well,
committee.
if you would, and I think this is one of those bills that does not have to come out of, this bill does not have to come out before crossover day, since this is a House resolution to create a House. So plenty of time to do that. And now, what is the will of the committee? Does everybody understand what the language is? We have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. Any further discussion? Any proposed amendments? If not, all in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Ayes clearly have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, to the committee members, if you would, Secretary Jones, Administrative Assistant to the Committee, Jones, Brown, is going to be finding a room for this afternoon. Please make all attempts to either be here or be online. We will be taking up both the discussion we've already had on the bill as well as the constitutional amendment, so we can take that part of the argument out if possible. Representative Mitchell, would you be glad to help Representative O'Neill in any way possible? And I'm not going to call on you, Representative Collins. You made that. And let's see. What is Bennett? Would you like to help? And Big Gordon. Very good. If not, so if that being said, we're going to suspend this meeting until this afternoon when we know what time and what room number, so we can move forward with the Ms. O'Neill's legislation. That being said, everybody have a good lunch and we'll see you shortly.